A few times, what I did was talk. Didn't know about who I was talking to. I didn't believe in any God, that's for sure. I just talked. I talked to, I believe it was this, whatever spirit was hearing me. I just called on spirit world. All you good spirits that work in a good way, help me. It's almost like screaming it, not so much loudly, but inside I was screaming for help.
Tanshe Kiawao back again today with Lester and Agnes. We left off the other day talking about just the transition of Lester leaving the school and kind of what the next steps were for him. Agnes, if you want to kind of lean into that a little bit, and then Lester can take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good to be back here again with you, Dad. It's been really, an honor to sit and listen and, understand so much about your life experiences and how, that's impacted you. And a lot of stories that will definitely, stay with me forever. And talking about, all of those experiences, I kind of want to hear more about, life after you left residential school. I know that at the age of 15, you were able to leave legally, right? Like that was the legal age that they could not force you to stay any longer. If we could talk more about, that and some of your experiences, I think that would be a good follow-up.
Mm-hmm. All right, I just reflected on the day that I left. I had it was a confrontation, yet it was mild. It's still a confrontation when I brought up a lot of issues. Myself being punched from behind, can't hear good to this day. Uh, I brought that up with the director, and I brought up the sexual abuse that a lot of us experienced. And I told them straight out, the others asked me to come and speak to you about it. And his only response was, "Oh, it's so hard to take care of all of you." That was the only response I got from him. Now, it was at that point I realized, no, there's going to be no college in Richmond, California. I have nothing more to do with this church, this kind of forced belief. I'm out of here. So I went and I packed. I didn't have much. I think a change of clothes, toothbrush, and things like that. And I walked out the front door. And he chased me down the road. And he said, "You're going to need this." And he there's a little leather pouch in my pocket. As I left, all I had was bus tickets and had an appointment with the welfare to cancel my wardship, which is worth close to $200. Okay, them days it was a lot. So I accepted to cancel everything to do with me. For a few dollars, why not? So as I walked farther, and he kept telling me, "God bless you," and everything else, I rejected everything that he had to say. As soon as I was out of sight, I thought, wow, finally, got a little pouch full of money. I opened it up. It was a rosary. I tore it into 10,000 parts and threw it away. Threw it all over the place. And I make no apology to anybody who's religious and believes in the lies that they tried to force us to believe. So that was my introduction to the world. Uh, as I left, I had no idea where I was going other than get the $180 settlement, get a room, and start to find a job from there. Well, the social worker was Bob Smith. I remember him clearly. Kind of a mean guy, but at the same time sensible. He said, "Look, the amount of money I'm going to give you, we can get you just as much money if you'll continue to go to school and just go to a rooming house or a place that has an extra room. People will be like not foster parents, but just be there, older people. So there's a lot of rooms you can rent. So I agreed to it. It lasted, I believe it was 3 months. And the place where I stayed, I couldn't fit in. It was very, I would say, very white, meaning none of my world, my ability to accept that the way they lived. So I just stayed out of the way. And I found that they as well would talk about me and the possibilities of me turning bad and things coming back on them, in the neighborhood and everything like that. Because I'd made a couple of friends when I tried to go to school. They also dropped out and they used to visit me. And the assumption was right away that we're bad because those were also Indian boys. They're my friends I met in school, although they'd never been to boarding school. But that's what they would talk about and I'd hear it. So I knew it's time to leave. That's the first time I experienced a prejudice. So I knew I wasn't welcome there. So I left. I said I returned to what I was foretold I would be condemned to, and that was Skid Row. But what a wonderful place. There was Indians everywhere. My relatives, I just come to know, and I remembered as a child, we remembered each other's. And I just couch surfed with my relatives for a while, working at odd jobs, always working strictly for cash. Uh, I was always paid at the end of the day. It allowed me to get my bread and butter and take care of myself. From there, I started to hitchhike everywhere. I knew that the old people were all right. I stayed with them for some time and it was good. It was so beautiful to be back there at Buck Lake and to be able to walk the trails towards Medicine Lake and hear the eagles in the sky. It was so wonderful. It just brought me alive and I was just thrilled. I was like a little kid all over again. And I remember I was so happy I was crying because I was just so happy just to be back there and experience that alone. But it was so wonderful to have the old people like Golfcom. She ridiculed me, but she also made me laugh. She asked me something in a language, and I answered her in English. And she looked at me, she said, "Wah, wah, monias." The little white man, monias. Where we both laughed. She wasn't a huggy person, but she come and put her hand on my back, tapped me. She understood. But she was like that, and she'd ask me something. I'd always have to turn to Annie, who was raised by them, like a sister. She'd always tell me what they're saying. So that's more or less how I got it back. And after I left them, the open road. One of the things I got to bring up when we were together in Edmonton, some of us who were in the boarding school, uh, we ended up. One of the brothers, I won't name him, he's passed now. They killed him. He had a car. We knew it wasn't his. So we all piled in. There's 6 of us. So we went for a joyride. Sure enough, police came after us, chased us, got out of the car right in front of what's today the same building called the Alberta Legislative Building. We jumped out right near there on 109th Street and we ran. And one of the brothers, he started to run across the high level bridge, which is still there today. And we're watching from the bush. I didn't see clearly, but I saw him fall off the bridge or come down into the water. Never seen him again. Now, the other brothers, they told me there was 5 of us, there were 6 of us to start with. There was 5 of us left. And the other brothers told me the cops threw him. They caught him. They came from both ends of the bridge, and they cornered him. And they said they grabbed him and they threw him over. They killed him for stealing a car. So that was so tragic because we were all pretty close. We were very close. It was the first time we all cried together. We went to see a lawyer who was a friend of ours, Jerry. He was a young guy, and he liked us. He said it would be a pro bono. But then when he found out all the evidence, what the police report was and what we had to say, he told us, and he actually sat in his office and cried. And he said, "You guys, you don't have a chance." He said, "It's stacked against you." And he cried because he knew all of us. He even knew the brother that they killed, because he represented him several times. So those are kind of things that stuck with me, and I decided I'm going to hit the road. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be away from everybody. I'm going to be away from all harm, all memories of that which was evil. So I started to move, menial jobs everywhere, worked most of the farms around Edmonton, worked my way south.
I just wanted to say, Dad, when you left residential school by choice at age 15, it would have been 1959.
1959, yes.
59. And, you know, at that time, you know, the 60s scoop had already, you know, began. But children from, you know, our communities were still being placed, you know, in those residential schools. Just to give like an idea of, you know, how these assimilation policies just continued to, you know, add harm to our relatives and to our communities and families. But I imagine that even coming out of residential school at that age, at that time, how difficult it was trying to go into a society that still treated you as less than just for being First Nations, you know, just being rejected by the society.
Yep.
And I know
It
that
was,
has with your later years and all of the actions and grassroots efforts that, you know, you took part in. But I just
yeah.
wanted to add that in about the year and, you know,
Yes, in 59, I have to say, before I left, it would be, yes, it would be 59, and I visit your Aunt Yvonne with my little sister. She was all alone then. All the other older sisters had left that Good Shepherd home, which was a block or two from where she was, the O'Connell Institute. And I just, in my heart, I just had to get her out of there somehow. I was going to tell her to run away, that, that there's a safe place for her with Brother Bob and those French people that took him in as foster. They were wonderful people. They said they would take her anytime I talked to them. So I left that with my brother Bob, who stayed. He was always working and or playing hockey. He was very good at it. So with that information, I hit the road. Later on, when I came back, I visit Yvonne at her foster home. She was part of the 60s scoop. She went from an institute right to a white foster home. And I came to the fence. I didn't go in the house. I wasn't allowed in there. So I walked up to the fence. That's when she said, "Look at those kids and look at me." She was brown. She said, "And I'm to call them brother and sister." She says, "They don't like me. They tell things against her, say, make up stories about her, all that kind of stuff." And I don't know how badly she was treated. She didn't mention. But I knew she'd get out of there. I told her, "If you get a chance, you run away. Here's the address, everything." I recall telling her that and giving her the address where to go to be a safe house for her. Now, so it wasn't too long after. I was so happy. I come off the road. I went right to, I'll give you your names. It was Joe. We used to call him Jose. Jose and Mimi, French people from the north. They were true parents in the truest sense of the term. They had little girls, little daughters, and they were just like family, just like little sisters. Very respectful, not spoiled. And here was Yvonne. She was there when I visited. I was so happy. She was in good hands. So, and after that, oh, about a year later, when I got off the road again, I went over to Joe and Mimi. Sure enough, there's Donnie, my younger brother Don. He ran away and made his way to Edmonton from admission up north for all the dark kids. And he made it. And at times I sat with him. He started to talk, but he'd get lost. He couldn't focus on what he was totally saying. There would be gaps. And he'd often say, he said, they hurt me. They hurt me. It was years later, I found out from a brother by the name of Berard. He said they used to take a hammer to him. They hit him twice in the head with a hammer. When I heard that, I felt the first time in my life, I felt like killing somebody. I felt like killing them for what they'd done to my brother. Stealing him from me because he's dark, putting him in another institution because he's not adoptable. Not that we cared about it one way or the other. But that's the kind of things that I hit the road about. I just, a lot of that was too devastating for me. And I just wanted to be alone and just forget about everything. Along the way, I started to meet a lot of the children who were victims of the boarding school, and the same as Sister Yvonne. They were gone from one institution to a white home. There was never an Indian home allowed to adopt. Never. Even if mixed bloods, they weren't allowed. I don't care how white you may look, you weren't allowed to go by your name and they know your bloodline. There was all white families that benefited. Then it turned to foster where they were paid. They were paid a lot of money to take care of foster kids, and some of them had 5 or 6 of them in their places. I visited with some of the younger people that showed me places that they lived and how many of them were taken in and they were fostered. I was all part of the 60 scoop. They would pay white people to take the children in, and they would allow 5 or 6 at a time in the same home, just to get them off the record of them being responsible. I know that's what it was, to wash their hands. And they could never blame the white parents. None of them were ever brought to trial for any of the atrocities committed against those children that were part of that scoop. And I'll tell you right now, and I feel good to say this, I don't care what anybody else says. I was the one that coined that term, 60 scoop. It was me and your Auntie Yvonne, when she was fighting to get children back for how many years she was at it. When they used to slam doors in her face because she was fighting for those kids to bring them home. Finally, she went and got her degree. She went and got her degree in social work, and she said, now I can slam the door in their faces. I felt so good about what she was doing. She worked with a little white guy who was good at tracking children. He tracked many of them as far south, like my nephews and nieces of late Sister Dorothy's children. Texas, Louisiana, Florida. He tracked them all. I remember last time I seen him, I'm not a huggy guy, but he hugged me and I hugged him because I know he was a good man and he was doing this all pro bono on his own. He was starting to be a lawyer, but he quit. He thought there's no way anything's going to be resolved for us in that manner. So he became a legal detective, I guess you will, to track down a lot of the children from the 60s school. He did so well. And wherever you are today, you're a good man. And I thank you for what you've done. Now, the other part is this. When I left there for years, well, I wouldn't say years, for a year or two, I felt so free. I thought, oh, there's nothing like that on my mind anymore. And then I ended up in jail. So it was a long period of time. I think it was 6 months the first time I went in. So it was a good time, 1/3 of my time off. But while I was in there, all those things start to come back to me. The beauty of that place, Buck Lake, Medicine Lake, all that area, that's what kept me alive in jail. That's what kept me going during my drug addiction after getting out of that jail. That's what kept me alive, just the memory of the beauty of the old people, of how things were. Sometimes I'd get so high, if you will. It's just like I didn't want to come down anymore. I just wanted to die. But it was those thoughts that kept me going, thinking of the beauty of the old people, the good life we had, all of it, and the wonderful things that I experienced spiritually. That, that it just can't be erased. It couldn't. It stayed with me, and it was in me, and that's what was my survival. That's what it was. It was wonderful thoughts about the experiences I had as a child in a beautiful place on this earth, beautiful paradise. So it wasn't long after that, again, I messed up. I was in prison again. I was never in prison for anything that had to do with any sexual abuse or any harm to anyone other than defending myself. And I've had several charges of assault. It was always for defending myself. I've never attacked anyone in my life. But I did not back down either. I got a lot of lumps for that. But being in jail for those reasons, I decided that's the end of it. No more of it. And it did end. I put an end to my addictions. I got help from a woman who adopted me, an Indian woman. And she became my mother. She dreamed of me before she met me. And she told me straight out, her sisters who, I mean, sorry, her daughters who were like my sisters, we always were like that before I even met their mom. We always take care of each other, it's the 4 daughters. And they told me, they said, the old woman wants to see you. She's in Vancouver now. So I went to see her. And it was in a house that we took over, the Indian movement. We took it over because the money was being wasted and its original purpose not being fulfilled. So we took it over, and we got all the homeless mothers with the children waiting 2 to 3 weeks for a welfare appointment. We got them all into that place. It had 8 bedrooms plus a basement. So my adopted mom, she chose the basement. What a wonderful woman. She sat there with me and the girls, and she spoke in the language. Then she turned to me and she said, "You're going to make that evil one happy. You're going to make him very happy if he gets hold of you." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "He wants you pretty bad." She said, "I've seen it." I said, "He wants you because there's something in you that's good, but you're hiding it by putting poison in your arm." I looked at her, like my sisters, I looked at all of them. They all said, "No, no, House, we didn't rat you. This old lady knows things." So there's nothing I could hide from her like that. So I told her, "Yes, I need help." So she just smiled. She said, "Okay, you come upstairs now." So we went up. It was so wonderful to see all those little kids that from everywhere, West Coast, everywhere. They just cling to her. She walks in the kitchen. They all run to the kitchen. Oh, it's all full of them. They finally, these kids had the cocoa. It was so good at that time. And she gave me a tea. She gave me one glass of tea. And she said, now you go and sleep, which I did. And a lot of people, I don't care whether they understand it, believe it or not, I'm going to tell you anyway. When I woke up, I was expecting to have my skin crawling, be scratching, itchy, sweating, wanting to go out, grab a cap of heroin and bang it up. I couldn't do it. I had no desire. I wondered what's wrong with me. I lost, my body wasn't hurting. My nose wasn't dripping. I was okay. So I went down and she was in the kitchen and she made me a meal. I said, how do you feel? I told her I feel different. She told me, in time, you're going to go someplace where you come from, in the mountains, somewhere around there. She said, you're going to end up over there. Somebody's going to invite you. She said, you go with them. Which did happen. And it was the beginning for me of probably the greatest awakening in my life. I stayed in those mountains for a good 3 weeks. And it may have been the mountain air, everything that cleared my mind. It made me see clearly all the things that had transpired and all that has happened to me as a child. Not only me, but all those that I've come to love along the way. Brothers and sisters, and how tragic their lives ended. So it was also strengthening me. I decided this will never happen to me and nobody around me. I'll do my best to try and take care of myself and others that are near me. And I know that within my heart, I start to change. I start to feel things I never felt before. I didn't want to feel. I start to miss the old people. And I got the word that they both passed on. I wasn't there. It's something about funerals I don't like to see. Uh, it's been people being put in the ground. It was always like that with me. I couldn't go to funerals much, other than my father, late Magnus, your grandfather. But I find out later what it was. When I knew that there was a purpose for us being buried up in scaffolds or in trees. There was a reason for it. There was a very wonderful spiritual reason for it. And I learned later about the ancient way of being burnt entirely until you are ash. That's what I desired. Sometimes still think about. But I realized then it was in me to answer myself why I could not accept seeing people being put in the ground. It's almost like it wasn't. It was like to me, it felt like putting them down 6 feet. It's to suppress the spirit. That's what I felt. That's what I thought. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. Nobody would understand what I'm talking about or what I felt. That's what I experienced. So I don't go to funerals where they put them in the ground. And your old great grandfather, uh, late Deaf Henry K, he explained that to me well when I was actually tutoring with him. He was growing me up spiritually when I was, in my 30s and older. He explained it to me. He said quite clearly, he said, you people invited me here to speak for this young man. He was 10 years old. You know which one it was? One of your cousins. And they say he hung himself, but he didn't. He was one of those institutions in Regina. But when he spoke, he said, you have also this man of God here, preacher. He said, you can't do this. You either accept one or the other, because if you try both, you're going to confuse that spirit, will not know where to go when it changes worlds, when it's time for that spirit to leave. I understood that clearly, and it answered me why I could never, ever be around people being put in the ground. It's strange how things come to you years later, and you understand clearly what it is you felt and didn't know at the time. So that's one of the things I learned along the way of my lifetime. Moving on.
I wanted to just say, well, first I wanted to ask like how old you were, when you were able to, stop the addiction to heroin and all that. But in thinking about, addiction, and I think about there's this physician, Gabor Mate, who's worked a lot in First Nations communities, with looking at addiction and the impact of trauma on addiction. And he has said that addiction is a normal reaction to abnormal situations. And every experience of First Nations people in Canada is not normal. The things that we've had to endure as families, as communities, as just people, it's completely abnormal, and there's so much trauma that was really forced on a lot of us. And so that saying really has always made sense to me, that addiction is a normal reaction to abnormal situations, and it's just really helped me understand people who hurt and cope through addiction of any form. So but yeah, I was wondering what age you were about when you made that decision and you're able to come out of your addiction through medicines and guidance from those
Oh,
elders.
yeah, I'll say this about heroin. It's probably the greatest painkiller in the world, because any physical pain I had, I would use heroin. I was fortunate in some respects to get it as clean as I could get it, because I worked for, well, I won't name anybody, but I worked for somebody who had direct import business. And I used to sit there for hours, and I'd never even have to use a needle. It was so powerful capping up the heroin. You get so high, they'd have to relieve you. And I know that I never had any pain. And even emotionally, you could kill the emotion. So that man you're talking about, he's right. He's absolutely right. Because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to kill all those things that used to come back to me all the time. And I thought, no, I don't want to think of that evil anymore. I don't want to be part of it. So I stayed high for the longest time. Uh, I was in my 30s, close to my 30s, late 20s, when I finally realized I gotta quit this. It's not me. And again, I ended up in prison. Not for very long that time either. I think I got a year. And I decided then and there it's got to go, because in prison all they give you is a pill to relieve your, oh man, your sickness. It's so fierce, especially in prison. So I knew this is it. It's got to stop, because it can only get worse. Most everybody around me was going to prison. I had no fear of it. It's just that comfort zone I was in. I was going to lose it. I'm going to start to hurt again. It's going to, so I had to find some way of getting help. Uh, that was, yeah, late 20s. That's when my adopted mom showed up and helped me. Uh, there were so many things that I'd done illegally. Uh, I know I never hurt anyone badly. All I did was do unto others that they did to me. When I was robbed for my heroin, before I could swallow quickly, they got the bundle out of my mouth, put a knife to my neck, cut me a little bit. But I got revenge and did the same thing back to them. Cut them a little bit and got their bundle. So those are the kind of things that went on. It was almost like in-house addicts. It was a strange world. You could be your throat could be cut at any time. And I was fortunate it didn't happen. Through all of that, I could never bring myself to scream to Jesus or anybody else that was pounded into my head as some kind of savior. And I thought about it later. I thought maybe I'll try it. Remember that one night I was so sick, so sick. I just wanted help somehow. At that point, I decided, no, I can't turn back to that lie. So a few times, what I did was talk. Didn't know about who I was talking to. I didn't believe in any God, that's for sure. I just talked. I talked to, I believe it was whatever spirit was hearing me. I just called on spirit world. All you good spirits that work in a good way, help me. It's almost like screaming it, not so much loudly, but inside I was screaming for help because I knew this is not me. It can't go on. It's got to quit. I know I'm a better man than what I've become. So I got help. I did get help. Now, where I was okay, I was clean. Now, what happened shortly after, I got an invite. It's like my late adopted mom said, I was invited back home. It was just straight west of Rocky Mountains, a place called Kootenai Plains. That's the Stony Nakota territory, but ours is also right near there, our boundaries. No, no, the ones who invited me, one of them said that they dreamed of me being there with them. So we finished what it is that we set out to do spiritually. I didn't think I could make it. I didn't think I could. But after 4 days, I know I was all right. So that was the beginning of the greatest awakening for me. I believe I was 31 years old. And from there, again, I started to move around. I wanted to go and see people, relatives, and I was just happy again in my life. I just wanted to meet everybody and let them know I'm okay. We're all okay. Uh, we have a life. I was just full of life again. I was bursting. So much energy. At times I didn't know what to do with it. So where in my travels, I have to bring this up as you mentioned. In my travels, I started to meet people from the time that your Auntie Yvonne came to Saskatchewan, and she started a non-government approved or sanctioned or funded organization called Biakwak. Biakwak, Biakwak means you're alone. And she was still helping families. And at times when I go and camp overnight at her house in Regina, in the basement, there'd be about 6 or 7 beds, all with clean linen, everything. All these little kids are in there. She said, she asked me one time, would you like to come and see what I do? I said, sure. So we went to what became known as Sniffer Street. And we got over there, and there's these little kids. They're running out on the street. Some of them bare jeet. Some of them their diapers are just hanging full. And sure, she's running after them. I'm running after them, and catch them. They're just laughing. We bring them all back, get them in her car, or bring them in the house, get them changed. She always used to carry Pampers with her. And so we changed the kids up, cleaned them up, and she scolded the parents. She said, you're not going to see your kids, and the welfare are not going to know about this. They won't take your kids. You know where they're going to be, and you know what you have to do to come and get your children. She was so good and strict that way. And where they both cried, the parents, remember, they both cried and they hugged her, they thanked her. But it was so wonderful to see that all those kids down in her basement, they're all happy. And then it would happen again. A week later, I went on another. It was our own scoop that time. It was a baby scoop to save them from the welfare apprehending. You know, it was so wonderful what she was doing. And wherever you are, sister, I remember those days, and I'm grateful you invited me. I'm so glad for what you did. But,
Yes. Powerhouse. I had been looking online at some old articles and I saw some from the 80s about Auntie Yvonne and the work that she was doing and the organization that she started. And I think she was like maybe 30 years old, you know. And my Auntie Yvonne also, you know, has an incredible life story, has so
oh,
many
yes.
experiences, things that she survived, just like my dad, Lester. And it's just amazing to see how you know, Auntie Yvonne can come out of, you know, that life and just go right to helping others. And like I said, she's my other mom. When I wasn't with my mom, when I wasn't with dad, I was with Auntie Yvonne, you know, and I was always safe and taken care of, loved, and just in good hands when I was with her. And she's always had a big heart like that.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times in my travels, after that, I used to laugh, think about those days. And I always had a good mind for her. She just keeps going, never quit. Back anymore. Don't ever give up. Well, there were some of the wonderful things that I experienced. But when I start to read some of the reports and get to know some of the younger people, they were a lot younger than me from the scoop. Some of their stories hurt so bad. Again, I started to get those feelings of just wanting to choke somebody that's responsible. If one choke could do it to put an end to it, I would make that choke and sit in prison the rest of my life if I could stop it now. You know, that's how I felt then. Many times that went through me. I'm not one to be self-suffering or whatever. That's just how I truly felt. If I could just take out one life, then they can put me in prison for the rest of mine. If it means no more harm towards any of these kids, no more. Stop it all. That's how I felt. And at times it was so frustrating. Uh, like in Vancouver, at the place that we took over, it ended up that when some of us weren't there, it's almost like gangs took over. Little gangsters took over, moved into that place, started robbing the women on their welfare day, taking their checks, abusing the kids, all of it. So I figured it was time because City Hall was so good to us. We had the welfare. We went to City Hall. We took all the kids, the women, us. We had the drum. Walked right into City Hall, Vancouver, right into City Hall meeting. You might as well say we brought the dogs and cats, which I think one of the comments were made about it. You forgot the dogs and cats, but they heard us. And there was one of the counselors, he's the head of the police, his portfolio is late Harry Rankin, self-pronounced communist, whatever, but very professional. But at the same time, he had a kindness that some people didn't really pick up on. And he immediately said, these people have some demands. And what are they? Number one was no more, these women are not going to wait 2 to 3 weeks anymore for a welfare appointment when they have several kids and they have no place to go but to a party where, you know, they're allowed to stay. And it's not healthy for children. So that's what was happening. Different houses, they'd have party houses. And sometimes we tell them, look, there's some kids with their mom coming over there. You know, put them up. You just be cool, be quiet, have some respect for them. A lot of them did. So that's how we took care of ourselves best we could. Now, we're in that city hall meeting. We said we want a woman. We want the woman who's in charge of this area. We knew her to bring a checkbook and come to the lodge itself, which is about one, not even a city block, a half a city block from City Hall. That's where it was. Now, what transpired was the next day she did show up with a checkbook, and we'd make sure that the women with the children were the first ones in line to receive any kind of help whatsoever. And there were other women out looking for houses, looking up in the newspapers, checking them out, see if the people were prejudiced or not, and finding them places that are, not not high income high income places, but it was working so well. Now, where there was an abuse, some of the people, these gangsters, these guys that they were street pimps. These guys, we were told later, they showed up with their own families, their own kids in the lineup and started to grab checks. Some of them are grabbing $6,000 a month from different sources. I mean, do what you will, do what you will, but that's a reflection of us and what the good we're trying to do. It's almost as though we were part of it, which we were not. And those guys used to threaten people with death, and they would. A lot of them would. I know a few of them. I won't name the names, but you know some of the names from Saskatchewan, that they were like that, and they did take life. They did take people's lives. I never wanted to be part of that. I never wanted to be around them, but they always tried to come near the Indian movement, people in the movement, and try to influence their way in. They were rejected. That's what that's what was bad for that whole movement, trying to help people, was for what they did. Now, things did get better for a lot of them, but it was still going on. They were still stealing children, just as we know, all of us here now, we know it's still going on today. They're stealing the children from birth, from the hospital. They're taking the children. How many cases have I read about here and there? And I'm tired of making comments about it, reacting. Because to be reactionary isn't helping any at all. Something has got to be done. So in my travels, when I came back, I'm moving ahead a bit. When I came back to uh, this part of the world, in particular in the mountains, I was in Rocky Mountain House. I took a contract there with the Friendship Center's 6-month contract. And the reason being, I was proposing to build a log house within the town limits of Rocky, for all in particular, the older Indian women who did such beautiful work with moccasins, uh, buckskin jackets, moose hide jackets, you name it, beadwork. Yeah, so wonderful. And here they're selling them for $50 a jacket. That's all they could get. I thought, no, this is theft. So I put in the proposal, and I had to work it myself. So I went to the reserve west of Rocky, which is Sunchild Ochies Reserve. I talked to a couple of the counselors, and I told them what I intended to do, because it's their people, especially the older women from both those reserves, that needed to get better money for what they were doing than what they were given that far. So they agreed. Sure, here's the forest. You go ahead and select the logs that you need. So I got uh, my cousin, found out she's my cousin that run the Friendship Center, Carrie, and one of her sons was good at spotting, like or trees that are straight up and down. And so he did it, got them all cut. They were brought in. Everything was done without any money, no money. So I got a place to mill them, peel them, all of it. And my contract ended. I had to go. Oh, before that, I went to the town hall and had a meeting with the town hall, and we argued back and forth. Finally, I had to nail them with, "You're on Indian land." And I even told the mayor at that time. He had the sports shop. Everybody went to him for their tackle, for fishing or whatever. So I told him, I said, "You know what? Your business is going to increase about 100% if you okay this." He said, "How do you figure?" I said, "Well, most Indian people that I know, that's the shop they go to. A lot of them don't go to your shop. And I'll tell you why. Because a couple of times they experienced prejudice. So I'll tell you that straight out." So I said, "Well, that's between you and I. Let's talk about this later." But anyway, he passed it during my absence. So we had the land, we had the logs, we had the labor, everything was set up. The contract ended. But that's the time a young woman used to come in and visit. She liked playing guitar. That's my children's mom here in the mountains. 7 children. So we got together, and that's where I moved up over here where I am now, getting better. And it was a good life, hard. I was glad to see they still burn wood, they still hunt. When I got there, no, I'm sorry. When I got there, I showed up. When I left Rocky Mountain House, I went hunting and I got 2 elk. And I filled my car. And my car was sitting like this, driving like that. The trunk was full of elk meat. The back seat was full. Yeah, I have no license. I never get disturbed. So I arrived over there in the mountains. I went directly to her mother's house. And she came out. I said, "Well, got some, I got some meat for you here." What was said was, "Go to the back door. Did anybody see you?" I said, "What? Why? What does it matter? There's nobody here. There's no policeman here. I don't care." So I find out later that they weren't allowed to hunt. They were given a permit once a year to take 1 animal. And if you were on welfare, you did not get a permit to get an animal. It's crazy because that's who really needs it. Because everybody was on welfare. Well, everybody. So I thought, that did it. That's enough of this. So after I unloaded that elk and I found out about all this, I went hunting. They charged me several times and even had to tackle me to give me the subpoena. I wouldn't take it. So that's how it was up here. Struggle again, just to feed the kids. But we ate well. I hunted and I did good. I went to court for it and finally stopped them. The prosecutor went crazy. He said, "Now everybody can hunt." He says, "But you still have to get a permit." Well, no, not us. People here were living in where I am now. This was 2 mile by 2 mile fenced off area called a co-op. And you have every degree of blood here from full bloods to quarter breeds. We're still all family, all Indians. And they were not allowed to hunt. And here the elk are running across in front of your house. And nobody wants to hunt. They can't. They'll be charged. But they could get that permit once a year. Well, I put an end to it when I went hunting. And when I finally had to face the judge, and all these charges. I told him, I said, when I leave this courtroom, I'm going to go hunting because I have to feed my children. And I turned around and I pointed to Shane. He's now an environmentalist around here, I hear. But he was fish and wildlife. And I told him, I said, you and your young buddy there, Shane, don't you dare come bother me again when I'm hunting. Don't ever bother me again. I walked out of the courtroom. So it wasn't long after I went hunting with both me and my kids' mom, Merlin. We got two elk. We got two moose. We drove into town. And as they're coming in, Shane, Fish and Wildlife, and his partner, they're they're passing us, but they both look the other way. And here the the truck, half-ton truck, it's full of moose. You can see the horns sticking up, the legs, everything else. They didn't want they didn't want to see it. They didn't think I'd defy them. You know, to me, kids are more important than their laws. You're trying to say that I can't feed my family? I'm sorry, you're talking to the wrong guy. You know, and when it came head to head with all of this, I was fortunate enough to be told that I was to go east, that I would find somebody that would resolve any problem any Indian ever had. I thought, well, this is hard to believe. So I thought, well, if it happens, it happens. So sure enough, I get a call. I'm sorry. I met a man in Edmonton by the name of, well, I won't name him. He was a Mohawk. And he told me that the Mohawk warriors down east, they wanted to see me because just prior to this happening, I was called. There was two brothers. They were in trouble, and they went to a ceremony, and they were told, "There's a man in the mountains that can help you." And they were given just my Indian name, so they had to find out who I was. So then I got the call. I never knew them. They said, "We've been charged with selling tobacco and cigarettes on the reserve, our own reserve." I said, "Well, how much did they seize?" They said $200,000 worth. I said, "All right." I said, "I want to know if you entered a plea." They said, "No, we haven't entered a plea." I said, "Did you get a lawyer?" He says, "Yes, they gave us a lawyer." I said, "Get rid of him or otherwise I can't help you." They didn't understand. I was, "Well, that's fine. I can't help you." They phoned back. They said, "We got rid of the lawyer." So at that point, I had studied law. I'd studied on my own. I used to go to the law library, Saskatoon, Edmonton, and I'd study case law in relation to Indians. Everything you could think of, from even this apprehension from its beginning, even the laws it violates internationally. I thought, these are crimes. They're committing crimes continuously, and no Indian can take it to that level to have it addressed. I thought that's where it's going to go. It's got to go to stop it. So in my studies, I used to talk about some of the things, and other people heard about it. That's how these two brothers heard. So they said, "We'd like you to come and represent us." I said, "All right, that's fine." I said, "But I don't want you ever to refer to what they're going to try to do and refer to the written stipulations of a treaty. You can't use that. You can't use the stipulations because those stipulations are written by your enemy, not you. Did you understand that?" So they said they did. So I schooled them for about a month before that case. They didn't get it. So I told them, when the judge says anything to you, turn to me and I'll answer for you. So it went well. The first thing the judge said to me, he says, "Sir, are you a member of the Bar of Alberta?" I said, "No, this is Queen's Bench, federal court." He said, "No, I'm not." And he said, I see that you don't wear the attire necessary, the black robes that are a prerequisite." I said, "No, I have no intention. I have no intention of ever becoming a lawyer. There's no offense to those who are, because I'm here to present a rule of law, sir, that must be honored by this court." He looked at me and says, "All right, into my chamber." So the prosecutor, he was a young man, McCullough, and he objected, of course. So the judge says, "What qualifies you, sir?" I said, "What qualifies me is I'm an Indian." He says, "Explain." I said, "I am an Indian. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an Indian who has experienced everything that these men are talking about in relation to crimes. I know how to address this matter, and believe me, they have committed no crime." He says, "Well, the court will determine that, but I think you're qualified." So we went back in. The prosecution kept saying, would this man please read Treaty 4? And I refused. Finally, the judge said, "Why do you not read Treaty 4? It's because I'm not a member of Treaty 4, and the stipulations I cannot ever agree with, and nor will these two men ever agree with." And he looked at them. They looked right back at me. So he couldn't get anything out of them in relation to those stipulations of the treaty. Now, the reason I wouldn't read the stipulation, because here's what it says, that the Indians, or the Indian tribe, had surrendered blah, blah, blah amount of land and all of it. Well, right there, it's a lie. Didn't surrender any of it. Was held in trust. So finally, after how many moves I made, finally the judge said to me, "All right, sir, present your rule of law." So I had the references all written down on a piece of paper. I gave him a copy. I gave a copy of the prosecutor, and I held one in front of me and read it out. And here's what it is. I said, "Treaties can only be based upon peace, and treaties can only be made between two sovereigns." That's beyond international law. It's tribal law, but remember, tribal law is the foundation of international law. I found out that years later. Now here's what it is. The treaty, the law of that treaty frees them, because I pointed out that exactly where they're living, on the Pipikasis Indian Reservation, according to international law, that place is classified as a place where you keep prisoners of war. He says, "Yes, and what else, sir?" I said, "The other point of it is this. The rule of law says that these two men are covered legally because their tribe has a law that they were not allowed to live. They were forced to believe in a system of laws that are not of their culture. They're not of our world. And imposing laws upon them that are not ours constitutes the crime of treason." I said, "Sir, you've committed treason, and you should, and you could be arrested right off your bench." He looked at me and said, "I'm going to take 1 month to decide whether or not I have jurisdiction in this matter." And he did. I went home here in the mountains. I got a call from the brothers a month later. I already presented the rule of law. That's all was necessary. Either he honors it or he's a criminal. So here's the response. They said, "We don't understand his ruling." I said, "Read his ruling to me." So, "Did you write it down?" He said, "Yes, we have it here." I said, "Well, what does it say?" Here's what it says. after citing so many cases where they convicted Indians on various different charges and some imprisoned, he says, I find you guilty and I'm going to impose a sentence which is double the amount of taxation money owed on that tobacco coming into Canada. Here's his final words. But it's not enforceable. I beat him. I stopped him. Now, the Federation of Saskatchewan Indian sellouts, I mean it. Well, figure it out. Federation of Saskatchewan Indian Nations. You're not a nation if you're under Saskatchewan, a province. How stupid can you get? They paid me. I never asked for a dime. They paid me $10,000, which kept us good here for quite a while. And I accepted. Now, a friend of mine who does a lot of clipping, newspaper clipping. I used to be an independent journalist along with him when we were living in Regina. Used to do the odd story here and there. But he sent me clippings of a talk show. It's a redneck talk show in Regina. I think you probably heard it. And they were going crazy. They wanted to know, why are these Indians getting away with this? Why are they so special, getting off these charges? Going on and on like that. Why can't we do this? Why can't we sell tobacco? Blah, blah, blah. No, it also hit the Saskatchewan legislature. I still have copies of it. And the opposition critic, justice critic, said to the justice minister at the time, are you going to do anything about this? What are you going to do about this as a justice minister? He told him straight out, and I quote, he said, my learned friend should know that I, as a justice minister of this province, cannot override a federal judge's decision. That was it. That killed it right there. So in other words, I took back jurisdiction. We could have used it to stop all these kids from being stolen today. But those Saskatchewan Federation of sellouts, they didn't follow through. I took it back. What did they do? About less than a month later, I read in one of those Indian newspapers, they went and cut a deal, 60-40 gambling with the province. Here they could have took 100% like in the south where you're at. But they didn't. So they were cutting deals. A lot of them were bought and paid for. I have no respect for those who become like those who mistreat us. To me, that's a prejudice in itself, to become like them, to become like their elite. Because there is an Indian elite in this country. Believe me, those are the ones that are dangerous, that continue the policies that you and I both are talking about at this time. They continue those policies, and I mean it. They periodically speak out against it, but that's for political favor. They get monies for programs to stop it. It's only on paper. I've seen the same thing across this country. I could never be part of any organization, ever, because I see how corrupt they really are. Start out good and get corrupted. So when I said that thing about jurisdiction, the judge showed clearly he didn't have it. That's a federal case. That means he represents Canada. I stopped them. We took back jurisdiction. Yet the Indians that hired me, they're not Indians legally. They aren't. So they went against me. Yet they paid me. They paid me to do it. They never followed through. That's like one of the betrayals of my life. And to me, there's no forgiveness for that. And I truly mean it. They are responsible for what's happening today to the children that are still being stolen from the time they're born in that hospital. How many mothers have been left crying when their babies is taken right from birth? Those are the kind of things that still anger me today because it's still ongoing. It revives in me some of the feelings that I experienced being mistreated and witnessing some of them being beaten almost half to death just for talking out loud in line, going to chapel. The sickness of this other society is so fierce. It just makes you sometimes just want to go out, build my own cabin, and forget about the rest of the world. But there's too much to be done, so I won't be doing that right away. But the point of it is, this can be stopped, and it has to be stopped. If it be the rest of my life, then it'll be the rest of my life to try and put an end to it. As it is right now, there's people that are asking for my help because they found out 13 cases so far since that first one. 13 cases since I met the old man, the old Dakota, who taught me international law and he taught me tribal law. It's been 13 cases. They won't dare proceed. They all are stopped. So I know what works and I know what doesn't work. If I could help people to understand and become Indians, because right now, most all of our people are classified as everything but Indian. Indian is the truest term, because if you look at some of those treaties, what does it say? The Indian tribe, the Indian tribe. We're making a treaty with the Indian tribe, not the First Nation, not the Aboriginal, none of that. The Indian tribe. So when I bring that up with some of the people who are supposed to be learned in our world, they get offended. Look what Hollywood has done to us with that image as well. Quit sniveling about it, because legally that's the proper term to use. I've used it in a court and I've stopped judges. A lot of them, oh, show me the proof. Well, go pay for the transcript. I'm not here to accommodate you just to prove something. You know, there's so many people that are bullheaded that could possibly help. But it's almost like they want things on their terms. But when I look at the law entirely, it's a law that was given originally to everyone in this world. Everyone. We were given the same law. And I've got parts of it which I teach. It applies to non-Indians. It applies to the descendants of the white tribes of Europe. And I was taught the difference between white race and white tribe. Most of the people here are descendant of white tribe. That's why a lot of the people are so friendly towards us, because they have something within them that's still there. It's a tribal genetic that can't be destroyed. You know, a lot of people starting to realize now that that tribal genetic is coming alive. You know, there's so many people that I run into today, and not so much since this COVID, but prior, that they're so grateful to hear from our people. You know, the reality of how it was during my time, even before my time. You know, and a lot of them are encouraging as to how we intend to stop it. So I know there's a lot of good people out there who are non-Indian, but somehow they have a tribal genetic, and I know they do. And it's not so much they just mean well. They want to do something good. Then there's the others. There's others that I know that are influenced by white race thinking. That's always domination, elitism. That's the white race aspect of it. So I'm careful of those, because they always want to take over as opposed to follow direction, especially when the issue is ours. It's almost like trying to educate the whole world, and half of them are all against you. But be that as it may, one half, at least it's part of the way there. So if there's some way in my lifetime that everything that I've lived, there's some way that I can use all of that to bring about some kind of, not just positive change, some kind of permanent change for the good of all the babies born and never to be stolen. If there's some way, I'm going to do it. And I think I can do it. So I intend to put forward a position sometime when I'm feeling better on what I've accomplished so far and how people can help. Because in all of this, when we think of the babies that are just dug up over here, the numbers are now 7,340 last I checked. They're finding in these boarding schools dug up all around the grounds. And there's probably lots that are dumped other places. And there's all incinerators. Every one of them had incinerators. And there's even people admitting that worked at that time in a boarding school in Kamloops especially. One man who said straight out, he was told to burn some of them in incinerators. He did so. He was asked how he feels about it. He said, well, I've been forgiven. My God forgives. Isn't that a wonderful cover?
Yeah, that's just
Oh, I just,
no words
go
for
ahead.
that. But
Yeah.
Dad, as we come to a close, I just really want to say, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's good for people to really understand your life's work, what I've seen you dedicate, all of my childhood to, helping, traveling all over Canada, teaching, international law and helping your people wherever you can. Just want to say thank you, for all of that and sharing that background. As we finish up and come to a close here. And even, on our next visit, it'd be good even to just hear about your artwork. And if you haven't,
I was just getting revved up.
I know.
You got me going.
It's so
Yeah.
good though, Lester. Like, there's so many things that I wish we had the time to respond to today, or at least I would be able to respond to from what you were talking about in Rocky Mountain House. Like by the time you left there is when I lived there. And the difference is that you're talking about that cabin that would have made. Like Native kids were not welcome in Rocky. And I remember that Native Friendship Center very well. I walk past it every day. Like, um, and thinking about the things that could have been done to help, or even talking, like everything that you've talked about today has a lot to do with consent and what we consent to now. What we had to deal with just out of survival, but we don't have to consent to it anymore. We continuously evolve as people. As long as we hold our hand back to traditional ways, we can move forward in a really good way. And to close up, with the last few things you were saying within international law, and talking about international, like tribes, like tribes of people. We are inevitably tribes of people, just from different places. And I think about how we've been so separated by the concept, the colonial concept of race, right? That we forget that, and I don't want to get into it too much today, but maybe it's something people would research on their own after listening, is, understanding what happened in Ireland with the babies, there,
Yep.
again, by the hands of the Catholic Church. It's all connected, and it's all from one cause. And it's really reconciling that for a lot of us, when we're told something is so good, and then you start peeling away the layers and you realize how rotten it is, how absolutely rotten it is. Like, I was reading a thing online and it made me kind of sad and chuckle at the same time, because it said, what's the worst tourist destination you've ever gone to? And somebody said going to the Vatican, because their mom was a devout Catholic and was poor and prayed the rosary every day, and was so devout to this religion, but then went to the Vatican and saw all this wealth that isn't distributed amongst the people. And that hit me so hard in my chest, because I come from a family of Roman Catholics. I come from that legacy, and it's something I want to believe was good because I was taught it was supposed to be. But seeing the way my dad was treated by that system, and seeing the way my mom's family interacted with it, it's hard to reconcile that with ourselves. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of safety to be able to talk about it, safety to be angry, and safety to be sad about it, but then the safety to move forward from it too, you know. And I think if we could afford people more safe spaces to just be and to express these things, we would actually thrive. So, yeah.
Yeah. You know, the place that your father was in, Lacombe Home, your late father, it's named after Father Lacombe. And Father Lacombe, for example, he made a statement to the government, and he said, the best way to assimilate these Indians is to cut off their rations. That's a holy man that everybody thinks was just so wonderful. Cut off their rations, starve them into submission. And they named Lacombe Home, you name it, Lacombe Town, Lacombe, everything, after these kind of people. It's one thing to tear down statues of some of these dictators or whatever around the world. But as far as I'm concerned, most of the statues that are put up honoring people in this country, they should all be taken down. It's sometimes the truth. The truth takes a little bit of a push. And for all those people who are honored for all the bad deeds they did towards us,
Yeah.
they should be stripped of all of it and exposed. A lot of it's coming to light now through different people doing wonderful research.
Absolutely. Honestly, Lester, I think about this all the time, that for the discomfort that people experience for a short amount of time learning that what they've been taught is lies and what they benefit from is genocide, is not even comparable to what we still live with today.
Yep.
So that amount of discomfort from having privilege in and even micro amounts of privilege over other human beings, your discomfort doesn't trump our lived experience. And that's really what it comes down to. So it's hard probably to hear. But again, we also know in our community, we don't hold people upon pedestals very often because we know we're not infallible people.
Yeah.
And we're not perfect. Well, I mean, we're pretty close. Okay.
Okay. I like to comment on that one because one time we're sitting in jail and a couple of brothers says, you know, one thing I learned about our people, especially us guys, when us Indians are bad, we're very bad.
Very good at being very bad when we need to be, right? Yeah, or when we are. But
Well, in other words, whatever we do, it's bad. But they make it sound that we're seriously bad. We're really bad people, the way we're portrayed. But I had to laugh about it because when I think about it, some of the, to me, in my mind, some of the most notable gangsters were those who never got caught. A lot of them were Indians. They got good at it. Not necessarily harming people, no. Just things that are usually doing things that they know can be replaced. Like a lot of the things that I learned from them was banks are insured, everybody's insured. So you're not really stealing, you're helping them out.
that's a reality. I think that that's something else that can be definitely taken apart, in on an individual's need to find things out, like why are Native peoples scrutinized and penalized and imprisoned for the same thing that, another race would do, right? It's to keep the status quo, and that's really unfortunate. And I think that's something, obviously is what you're talking about. And as we lean into our conversation for next week, I would like to hear a little bit more on your perspective about that, like a little bit more about international law and why the status quo has been kept the way it is, and then obviously, as Agnes said, lean into your art a little bit too, because I would like to see more of that as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Right. I'll see what I can prepare.
Yeah.
I have lots I can show. And
Yeah.
giving us half of what he makes.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got some things in the works actually when I get back, now that I'm better. And I got to get back to Panoka and do some pieces to catch up. But your brother's Nip is desiring to come over and stay with me. eggs. I'm looking forward to it.
I was just talking to him last night.
Yeah. Did you give him an ear banging?
As always.
Well, he listens to you. I know he does. So,
I
yeah,
like
I'll be
ear
good.
banging. That sounds good. Like, like I just can't picture you being stern at all, Agnes. So
Sometimes you,
That one
sometimes,
sleep like that. Yeah.
say
You
that
know,
again.
sometimes you can say the same thing softly.
Oh, true. Yeah. Well, I'll wait for that to happen for me, but you know.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you both very much. And this has been, again, every time with you, Lester, is always amazing. And I think I've said it before and I'll probably think it or say it every time, but like the conviction in your voice and the way that you express things, it's so um, holistic because I see you experiencing everything again in real time as you're saying it, because as you've said, everything is so vivid. And I just appreciate you, uh, for lack of a better term, doing that labor with us because, it's good to hear. It's good to hear your stories.
It's doing so much for me as well. I feel so good. I feel so good that we're doing this. I've been holding back how many years, just fighting a lot of the stuff that had been building up, throwing it aside, thinking everything's all right. But no, it's so good to get it out this way because to me it's becoming more complete in my life. Uh, there's so many ends that should have been tied up, if you will. There's so many ends, so many things that I should say, that should end that I know that can. I experienced through law how some of it can end, and actually most of it can. But most of our people are not aware of the things that I've come to know because you've got to go off the beaten path. A lot of the research that the old man passed to me, it took me years to find. When he gave me the reference, but it's right on target. I've never read things so exacting in my life as what this old man had researched for 45 years of his life. And it's so wonderful to have him pass that to me to carry on. I feel beyond honored. It's like sometimes I think if I don't get at it, the old man's watching me. He's going to come in my sleep and slap me and wake me up and say, "Get at it."
you're banging.
Another ear banging. Yeah, but it's. I feel so good about this. I just feel happy today. The sun's out. Can see the mountains out the window, and cold as hell. But I'm going for a walk after. Went went yesterday about half a block, and I had to come back. Uh, it's so good here. So clean yet.
Mm,
I would sure like to see it stay that way for this little girl here and all the other little grandchildren, all yours, eggs.
mm.
Sometime, who knows? Maybe you'll be here. But I want to thank you for doing this, for inviting me to do this. I just feel relieved. A lot of ways, I feel just relieved. I feel lighter, and I feel good to talk about it. I feel there's nothing to hide no more, nothing to be shy about. I never was ashamed. I just always avoided those who tried to shame me. And like I said to a lot of young people, and a lot of them laugh about it, but it's true. Tell them, don't worry about dropping out of school if you're condemned for it, because I did. The reason I dropped out is so they couldn't fail me. So, I don't know if that's encouraging for some of them. I usually tell those that drop out, but yeah, this educational system, it doesn't need revamping. it needs to be discarded. Uh, there's a lot of good people among us who are trying to introduce an alternative educational system that'll suit a lot of for example, the 60s group. There's so many of them, and I just feel that some of their comments online, they're somewhat lost in relation to a lot of the things about our people. So they're grasping, and they're doing the best they can. And there's a lot of people online as well, Indians, that are starting to reveal things that are not so much of a secretive nature or sacred. I prefer things that are helpful to those who have experienced the scoop, who are coming back just empty-handed and not knowing who they are. Some of them not knowing they actually have an identity other than uh, Lester Howse, so on. To me, that's what matters. Is it's not a spirit name. It is your actual name in our world. They wouldn't call me Lester Howse in our world. No, they wouldn't be calling Aggie by that name. It would be exacting, because those names come spiritually, and that's what makes them exacting. So, talking about those coming back, I put comments once in a while on the internet to different people, because I know they experienced the scoop. I've got a few friends now who periodically get hold of me and ask questions in relation to international law, and it's so good to talk with them. And they're so open. A lot of those people who were scooped in the 60s, they're very intelligent, surviving what they had to. A lot of them are very intelligent people, and I sure appreciate them when they get hold of me and inquire as to what they can and can't do in relation to our position legally as people. It's such an honor, and it's so good to know that they're receiving it. And I hear later on from some of them comments that they're making. They're helping others. Once they learn something from me or people other than me, they carry it on, they pass it on, which is wonderful.
Yep,
So,
creating
so
those little ripples
yeah,
in the world. But
but
yeah,
it's work. Yeah, it's working. It's growing.
mhm,
It'll go further.
yeah.
Excuse me.
Better go for your walk and get some rest, Todd, and we can pick up at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty well over it. Just this cough. Just a
Well,
cough, and
a little more rest and another half block for you today.
yeah,
SP orders.
I might make a block today.
All right. Well,
There'll be 2 blocks there and back.
there you go.
Okay. Well,
All right,
thank you.
Lester. Have
Thank
a
you.
wonderful afternoon, and I'll speak to both of you soon.
Okay.
Right.
Take care, both of you.
Hi,
Rita.
hi.